It's April 1945, the final days of Nazi Germany. And somewhere in the mountains of Lower Silesia, a team of frantic scientists loads a mysterious apparatus onto a heavily guarded military transport. A bell-shaped device wrapped in lead shielding, crackling with an otherworldly energy that defies explanation, and then it vanishes into the chaos of history, never to be publicly seen again, leaving behind only fragments of testimony, cryptic documents, and a mystery that has haunted researchers for nearly 80 decades. This is the story of Die Glocke, the Nazi bell, a secret weapon so classified, so incomprehensibly advanced according to those who witnessed it, that it exists in that twilight zone between confirmed history and elaborate conspiracy theory, between technological breakthrough and wartime delusion. And what we discover about it may fundamentally challenge everything we thought we knew about the final stages of World War II and the technologies that emerged from Nazi secret research. The Nazi bell is not like other wartime weapons. It was not an aircraft design, not a rocket, not even a chemical or biological agent developed to kill enemies. Instead, it was allegedly something far more audacious and far more terrifying, a device that purportedly violated the fundamental laws of physics as we understood them, a machine that, according to eyewitness accounts from multiple credible sources, generated gravitational anomalies, distorted space itself, caused vegetation to undergo rapid growth or decay, and produced electromagnetic effects so intense that they left permanent scarring in the bedrock where it was tested. To understand how such a thing could have existed, we must first understand the mentality of Nazi scientific research in the final years of the war, when the regime was no longer constrained by the objective standards of peacetime science, but instead driven by desperation, by supernatural ideology, and by the belief that some technological revelation could somehow reverse the inevitable collapse that everyone, even the Nazi leadership, could see approaching with absolute certainty. In 1943, as the tide of war turned inexorably against Germany, as the disasters at Stalingrad and North Africa demonstrated that conventional military superiority alone would not save the Third Reich, the Nazi regime began pouring resources into a series of black-budget research programs that existed outside the normal military hierarchy. Programs that reported directly to Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler and his personal research organization, the Ahnenerbe, or the Ancestral Heritage Society, an institution dedicated ostensibly to archaeological research, but actually serving as a cover for some of the most bizarre and scientifically questionable projects ever to receive unlimited state funding. One of these projects, operating under the code name Schwarze Sonne, or Black Sun, began in the autumn of 1943, under the direction of a brilliant but enigmatic physicist named Walther Gerlach, a man whose pre-war credentials were entirely respectable. He had made legitimate contributions to atomic physics and had been considered one of Germany's leading scientists before the war, but whose activities during the war years became increasingly shrouded in secrecy, classified compartmentalization, and the kind of scientific mystique that attracts both genuine innovation and dangerous charlatanism in equal measure. The Schwarzsonne project was headquartered at a facility known as Wenceslas Mine, located near Breslau, in Lower Silesia, a location that had been converted into an elaborate underground complex with multiple laboratories, test chambers, and what witnesses described as heavily electromagnetically shielded research spaces that suggested the project was investigating phenomena that required isolation from external electromagnetic interference, a construction choice that demonstrates the seriousness with which Nazi leadership approached this research. The bell itself, according to eyewitness descriptions compiled from multiple post-war interrogations, was a massive bell-shaped apparatus constructed from an unknown metallic alloy that exhibited properties entirely unknown to conventional materials science, measuring approximately 9 feet in diameter and 7 feet in height, shaped like an inverted bell with a flattened bottom, and internally filled with some kind of crystalline substance that would pulse with a blue or violet luminescence when the device was activated. The outer surface of the bell was reportedly covered in unusual grooves and geometric patterns, features that some researchers have interpreted as Faraday cage configurations designed to modulate electromagnetic fields, though the exact purpose of these patterns remains unknown, even to contemporary physicists and engineers who have studied the available documentation. When the device was activated, according to multiple independent witness accounts, it would generate a field of such intensity that metallic objects in the immediate vicinity would levitate, that biological organisms would experience rapid metabolic changes, including accelerated growth or death depending on proximity and exposure duration, and that the surrounding air would take on a peculiar quality, with witnesses reporting a metallic taste, the smell of ozone, and the sensation of standing in an intense electromagnetic field. Most dramatically, some witnesses claimed that the device created what they described as a temporal anomaly, a zone where normal time seemed to operate differently, where processes accelerated or decelerated, and where spatial relationships became somehow distorted or non-Euclidean. Descriptions that, while difficult to verify or reconcile with modern physics, were reported with remarkable consistency across different interrogation contexts and by witnesses with no obvious reason to fabricate such extraordinary claims. The testimonies of specific individuals provide concrete details that form the foundation of everything we believe about the bell. Jakob Sporel, a Czech worker who allegedly witnessed the bell in operation multiple times, described seeing the device activate with a low humming sound that gradually increased in pitch and frequency, describing how the luminescence within the bell would intensify, how objects would begin to float and rotate within the electromagnetic field, and how the entire chamber would fill with an electric charge so powerful that it would cause his hair to stand on end and create a sensation of profound vertigo and disorientation. Sporel was interrogated by American intelligence officers in 1945, and his testimony was detailed, specific, and consistent across multiple interrogation sessions, leading American investigators to conclude that he had genuinely witnessed something extraordinary, even if the exact nature of what he witnessed remained scientifically obscure and difficult to interpret. Another crucial witness was J.R.G. Klein, a German physicist who claimed direct involvement in the Bell project, who described the device in technical terms that suggested genuine scientific knowledge rather than fabrication, discussing the electromagnetic coils, the power supply requirements, the shielding systems, and the suspected purpose of the apparatus as a gravitational anomaly generator or a device for manipulating space-time itself. Klein's testimony was particularly valuable because he was able to discuss not just what the bell looked like, but how it operated, what the intended applications were, and what the theoretical foundations of the project were based upon, explaining that the research drew on the electromagnetic theories of Nikola Tesla, on certain speculative interpretations of Einstein's general relativity equations, and on theoretical work in particle physics that suggested gravitational effects might be modifiable through controlled electromagnetic fields. The power requirements for the bell were reportedly extraordinary, with witnesses describing massive electrical infrastructure, cable systems that could carry enormous currents, and power consumption so high that it could only be supplied through dedicated high-voltage lines connected to the regional electrical grid. A level of energy demand that suggests the device was genuinely attempting to generate powerful effects, rather than merely simulating such effects for psychological or propaganda purposes. The radiation signature of the bell was also remarkable, and continues to provide physical evidence of its operations. In 1997, researchers investigating the facility where the bell was allegedly tested discovered radioactive isotopes embedded in the stone walls and floor of the test chamber, residues that could not be explained by any standard wartime military activity and which suggested that the device had indeed operated through some mechanism that either produced or involved radioactive materials in its functioning. This discovery provided the first genuine physical evidence that something extraordinary had indeed happened at the Wenceslas mine facility. Even if the exact nature of that something remained scientifically ambiguous and open to multiple interpretations, and it has since become a touchstone for researchers attempting to determine whether the bell was a genuine technological achievement or an elaborate fiction. The purpose of the bell, according to the testimonies and available documents, was nominally military, allegedly designed as a weapon that could generate gravitational anomalies capable of interfering with military aircraft or naval vessels. A device that could theoretically be weaponized to create a zone where gravity itself became unpredictable or inverted, causing aircraft to drop from the sky or missiles to veer from their intended courses. Some of the more speculative post-war accounts suggested that the bell's purpose extended beyond mere military application, that it was intended as a device for communicating with or contacting extraterrestrial intelligences, that it could be tuned to operate at frequencies that might bridge the gap between this dimension and others, or that it was designed to generate temporal anomalies that could theoretically allow observation of past or future events. These more exotic interpretations, while lacking any serious scientific support, have contributed to the enduring mystery and cultural fascination with the bell, suggesting that even Nazi scientists, for all their horrific ideology and ruthless pragmatism, were willing to explore the boundaries between proven science and speculative mysticism when the potential benefits seemed sufficiently transformative. The urgency with which the Nazis pursued the Bell Project in the final years of the war suggests that, whatever its purpose, they believed it represented a genuine technological breakthrough, a device that could somehow alter the fundamental parameters of the conflict, that could provide an asymmetrical advantage, that might compensate for their conventional military inferiority. This level of commitment to a speculative project, in the face of overwhelming military defeat, suggests that either the Nazis genuinely believed the bell could work, or that they were pursuing it for other reasons, perhaps as insurance against defeat, as a bargaining chip for post-war negotiations, or as evidence of technological prowess to preserve for future Nazi successors who might someday restore the Third Reich. As the Soviet army advanced from the east and the American army pushed from the west in the spring of 1945, the decision was made to evacuate the bell and disperse the Schwarz-Sun project to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. And this is where the documented historical record becomes genuinely fragmentary and unreliable, where sworn testimony from different witnesses contradicts, where multiple scenarios seem plausible, and where we must grapple with the profound uncertainty that characterizes historical events that occurred in conditions of extreme secrecy and chaos. Multiple accounts suggest that the bell was loaded onto a special railway transport in late March or early April 1945, that it was moved westward away from the advancing Soviets, possibly toward the Fichtel Mountains or the Bavarian Alps, where Nazi leadership was allegedly establishing the Alpenfestung, or Alpine Fortress, a final redoubt where the regime planned to make a last stand and perhaps hide technologies and treasure that they hoped might be recovered after their inevitable military defeat. The transport was allegedly guarded by elite SS units, suggesting that whatever was being moved was considered of supreme strategic importance, far more valuable than conventional military hardware, and multiple eyewitnesses reported seeing the transport or attempting to intercept it, though all coherent accounts of the bell's movements vanish in the chaos of May 1945 and the final collapse of Nazi Germany. From this point forward, everything becomes speculation and historical reconstruction based on fragmentary evidence. One school of thought holds that the bell was destroyed by its creators to prevent it from falling into Allied hands, perhaps detonated in a final act of Nazi defiance. possibly creating an explosion that would have left traces of radiation in the surrounding area and perhaps contributed to unexplained seismic or explosive events recorded in the Alpine region in April or May 1945. Another theory suggests that the bell was successfully hidden in an underground facility in the Alps, sealed away to prevent discovery, waiting either for Nazi survivors to locate it after the war or hoping that it would eventually be discovered and studied by subsequent generations. Though no credible evidence of such a cache has ever been discovered, despite numerous expeditions and investigations. The most controversial theory, however, and the one that has the most profound implications for post-war history, is that the bell was captured by American forces and transported to the United States as part of a classified intelligence operation, that it was examined and studied by American scientists in highly classified facilities, and that it became the foundation for classified military research programs that continued throughout the Cold War and into the present day. This theory is supported by circumstantial evidence. The extraordinary American interest in Nazi secret weapons research that led to Operation Paperclip, the classified recruitment of more than 1,600 German scientists, including many who had worked on advanced weapons programs, the documented interest of American military and intelligence agencies in anti-gravity research throughout the Cold War period, and the intriguing coincidence that bell-shaped UFO sightings began in the 1950s, shortly after American researchers would have had sufficient time to study and potentially experiment with the bell. Operation Paperclip itself, declassified decades later, revealed that American intelligence agencies had deliberately concealed the involvement of numerous German scientists in Nazi weapons programs, had provided them with false biographical information, had protected them from war crimes prosecution, and had integrated them into American military and aerospace research programs, all in the name of preserving their expertise and preventing Soviet acquisition of German scientific knowledge. Among the scientists brought into American programs was Dr. Kurt Debus, a former Nazi scientist who had worked on the V-2 rocket program and who went on to become the chief architect of the Kennedy Space Center, suggesting that the highest levels of American space program management included individuals with direct knowledge of Nazi advanced technology research. The connection between the bell and American post-war research programs remains speculative, but tantalizing, with some researchers arguing that the distinctive bell-shaped UFO sightings reported throughout the 1950s and 1960s were not coincidental but rather reflected the influence of Nazi bell research on American aerospace technology and on alleged extraterrestrial contact scenarios that may have involved the testing of captured German technology, disguised as UFO sightings to explain unexplained aircraft activity. The Soviets, for their part, appear to have taken the Bell and the Schwarzschild project seriously enough to pursue parallel research initiatives, with multiple German scientists interrogated in Soviet custody, providing detailed accounts of the device. Accounts that were apparently sufficiently credible to convince Soviet leadership that this represented a genuine technological achievement worth investigating and attempting to replicate. Soviet scientists and engineers were reportedly instructed to develop their own version of the bell, based on captured German documentation and interrogated scientist testimony, suggesting that the Soviets believed the bell represented a real technological breakthrough rather than a hoax or delusion, and that they were willing to invest resources in understanding and replicating its alleged properties. The scientific evaluation of the bell's plausibility has varied considerably among different experts. The mainstream scientific consensus, supported by most contemporary physicists and aerospace engineers, holds that the bell was either a non-functional experimental apparatus, a hoax perpetrated by desperate Nazi scientists seeking to attract resources and protection, or possibly an exaggerated account of some legitimate but ultimately inconsequential electromagnetic experiment that was transformed through the fog of war and post-war speculation into a legendary technological marvel. This interpretation emphasizes that the alleged properties of the bell, the gravitational anomalies, the spatial distortions, the temporal effects, are not consistent with known physics, and that the device almost certainly could not have functioned as described in various eyewitness accounts if such physics-violating properties were indeed generated. However, this consensus does not adequately account for several complicating factors. The consistency of eyewitness accounts across different individuals interrogated in different countries under different circumstances, the physical evidence of radioactivity at the test site, the extraordinary resource commitment the Nazis made to the project despite their desperate military situation, the intense post-war interest of both American and Soviet intelligence agencies, and the sophisticated nature of some of the technical descriptions provided by German scientists who claimed direct knowledge of the apparatus, an alternative interpretation, favored by some unconventional physicists and historical researchers, suggests that the bell may have been an early cyclotron, a device for accelerating subatomic particles through electromagnetic fields, a technology that was indeed being developed by Nazi scientists during the war, and that could plausibly explain both the electromagnetic properties and the radioactive signatures observed at the test facility. A cyclotron operating at high energies would indeed create powerful electromagnetic fields, would produce radioactive byproducts, and could potentially generate unusual physical effects in the surrounding area. Effects that untrained observers might interpret as gravitational anomalies or spatial distortions, rather than recognizing them as the predictable consequences of particle acceleration. Technology. Other researchers have proposed that the bell was a high-power magnetron, an electromagnetic generator capable of producing intense microwave radiation, a device that would have been extraordinarily dangerous to operate, that would have produced the observed electromagnetic and thermal effects, and that might have generated the spectral luminescence reported by eyewitnesses through the ionization of air and other atmospheric effects. These more conventional scientific interpretations suggest that the bell was real, that it represented a sophisticated piece of experimental apparatus, but that its alleged properties were either exaggerated in post-war testimonies or resulted from straightforward electromagnetic and radiation phenomena that seemed inexplicable to untrained observers but are entirely consistent with established physics. The physical evidence, though limited, continues to be discovered and analyzed. In 2008, documents surfaced through declassified American intelligence files, suggesting that the bell had indeed been a subject of serious scientific interest in American military research circles, that portions of the device or detailed drawings of it had been acquired by American forces, and that classified research into its potential applications had been conducted throughout the 1950s and into the 1960s. These documents do not prove that the bell was a functional anti-gravity device, but they do confirm that American military scientists took it seriously enough to warrant investigation, that they believed it represented a genuine scientific achievement rather than a hoax, and that some aspects of its alleged properties were considered worthy of further research and potential replication. The question of whether the bell still exists remains unanswered. Some researchers have speculated that it is hidden in classified American military facilities, preserved as a historical artifact, or as the foundation for ongoing classified research. Others have suggested that it may rest in private collections or foreign government hands, kept hidden from public scrutiny by those who understand its potential significance. Periodic reports emerge of researchers claiming to have located fragments of original Bell documentation, supposed survivors claiming deathbed knowledge of the device's location, or alleged experimental components that purportedly derive from the original apparatus. But none of these claims have been conclusively verified or widely accepted by mainstream historians and scientific communities. What we can say with certainty is that the Nazi bell represents far more than a mere historical curiosity or a footnote in the vast and terrible history of World War II. It stands as a symbol of the intersection between desperation and innovation, between the pursuit of knowledge and the corruption of scientific inquiry by totalitarian ideology, between the possibility that advanced technology might exist in classified forms entirely unknown to the general public, and the profound responsibility that must accompany any research that attempts to manipulate the fundamental forces of nature itself. The legacy of the bell extends far beyond the historical mystery of what it actually was or where it ultimately ended up. It reflects something deep within human nature, our endless fascination with hidden knowledge, our fear of what others might know that we do not, our tendency to populate gaps in historical understanding with speculation and myth-making, and our profound uncertainty about the true state of scientific knowledge and military capability that might be concealed in the most highly classified government and military research programs. Whether the Nazi bell was genuine advanced technology or an elaborate fiction conceived in desperation, its story endures and will likely continue to fascinate researchers, conspiracy theorists, and amateur historians for generations to come, because it touches on something fundamentally compelling: the tension between official historical narratives and the possibility of suppressed knowledge, between what governments openly acknowledge and what they might be hiding, between the scientific mainstream and the possibility of revolutionary discoveries concealed in classified research, and between the known world and the secrets that might lurk just beyond our comprehension. The bell remains suspended in that twilight zone between history and mystery, between confirmed fact and speculative fantasy, a perfect cipher onto which we can project our deepest anxieties about technology, power, secrecy, and the possibility that the world contains marvels and terrors far beyond what official sources tell us, and that somewhere, perhaps in a bunker hidden beneath mountains or in a classified facility accessible only to those with the highest security clearances, Die Glocke still exists, still resonates with an otherworldly frequency, still waits for someone to finally unlock its secrets and reveal the truth about what Nazi scientists truly achieved in those final desperate years of their doomed regime.